Now let's get into the critical race theory, because I didn't do my homework on this one, Robert. I didn't have the time, and I'm sorry, teacher.
Oh, there's also the Twitter defamation suit.
Okay, well, let's see what we're getting close on time, and I hear some madness upstairs. But the critical race theory lawsuit. Okay, now I think I know of it in broad brushstrokes, but I think you're going to have to inform the audience better than me, and I'll see if I have any questions. What is going on in the critical race theory lawsuit? There was
multiple suits being brought, some in California's class actions, but the most recent one was brought in Nevada. And what it is essentially it's challenging critical race theory is now being taught everywhere by government agencies, by government actors, by schools where they're indoctrinating kids in it. And critical race theory actually originated out of the legal academy. And they overtly said from day one, they're against the Constitution, they're against equal rights, they're against these things. That critical race theory is about deconstructing the world in terms of race and empowering people based on their racial identity and disempowering other groups based on their racial identity. It's open discrimination, in my view, is what it is. Just open, overt discrimination, but in the name of protecting the oppressed from the oppressor.
Now, but I only began to hear of critical race theory because I saw the acronym CRT. I don't even understand the name of it. I don't understand the theory. Is it critical of a race, or is it critical of all races? I don't even understand the
critical of all institutions based on a theory of the role race has played in those institutions. So It's very like, take Foucault, take Derrida, take deconstructionism, take a certain form of Marxism, sort of integrate it and just apply it and think of the whole world as white bad, black good. And that our institutions are themselves prejudiced. Institutional racism derives in part from critical race theory. The theory is that the institution of the church is inherently racist. So if you're part of the church, for that part, there's not everyone who believes that and within that theory, but there are those who do, particularly including the founders of BLM, who have their personal vendetta against the black church especially. That's why they're anti-church. That's why the Black Lives Matter's sort of mantra is critical race theory. So, take down the nuclear family, because all of these institutions are embedded with racial oppression, and you have to overthrow these institutions entirely. You have to burn your history. And so that's where it shares things in common with Marxism and certain kind of leftist ideologies and certain forms of utopianism and the like, is that you got to burn the past. It's a very French Revolution mindset about history. It's sort of, the best criticism of that, of course, was Edmund Burke, and it would apply very well to a lot of this. Or you could read a book like Nixon Agonistes by Gary Wills, which applies it actually to Nixon in a very creative and unique way, but gets into these broader theories of what true conservatism is and how progressivism is a threat to it. But CRT is part of that. What's amazing is, I'll give you an example. I was in Tennessee, and I got good friends there who are pulling their kid out, youngest child out of public school, because all he's been taught from the time he's been there in first grade is all about racial oppression and slavery and whatnot. And I was like, what? It's like, this is Signal Mountain. So, and this is getting everywhere. It's massive indoctrination of an idea that says 1775 was bad, that says everything that, that our American Revolution was bad. America's founders are bad. It's part of the idolatry and ideology that tears down statutes, that says that, in fact, that everything connected to Americans' history needs to be torn down. America's economic institutions need to be torn down. America's cultural institutions need to be torn down, except for the university, where all these people are getting their government-paid checks in part, of course. But that's what it is, and it pervades. But what it is it's teaching racial prejudice and discrimination in public institutions, now to the point where they're going to, I had a potential client inquire, say that, by the way, I've been, I now know I will be discriminated against in the vending process because the state has announced it's only going to give favorable treatment if it's a minority-owned business. You're seeing Uber talk about that. You're seeing Yelp talk about that. You're seeing, and all of these things are racial discrimination and illegal. And so what it is, they try to change the laws in California to allow it to happen. Even in California, they rejected these critical race theory ideas as applied to the law. And saying, no, we're going to keep our laws prohibiting discrimination in place.
Well, so now that you mentioned it, where was it? Wisconsin, where they mandated the face masks, but created an exemption for African Americans. I don't know if it was Wisconsin or Georgia. Was it Wisconsin?
I think it was Wisconsin. And there's a bunch of places that were, I think Portland was talking about doing that. A bunch of other places were. So I think that what needs to happen is all of these laws. So people are now starting to challenge it. They're starting to sue school districts. They're starting to sue state bodies because Trump did an executive order saying this is illegal, this critical race theory nonsense. Christopher Wallace then lied about it in the debate and pretended it wasn't critical race theory and was just preaching non-discrimination when it preaches discrimination and prejudice. And people are now that they know the executive order will probably be ineffective if Biden gets in on January 21st, they're bringing federal civil rights suits against any state government that's involved in this at all. And they're going to start bringing discrimination claims against employers who are involved in this because there needs to be a full legal a battle, because once they lost if you couldn't in California get the public to go along with it, you're not going to get any state to agree to this. So as long as you get past the bias of the judicial system, you should be a jury is going to say this is nonsense, and they have no interest in it. And that includes white jurors, black jurors, Hispanic jurors, Asian jurors. They all agree nobody likes this nonsense outside of a small group in the left academy that believes in this insanity, ideological insanity.
Which now that I think about it, which university was it that admitted to institutionalized racism? And then I think it was Trump who said, well, if you're admitting to institutionalized racism, give us back our grant money because it was given to you, or give back federal subsidies because they were granted to you on the basis of non-discrimination.
We've had part of that in Harvard. Yale's currently being sued because they openly discriminated against Asian students. In order to get a certain quota of other students in. So then the court excused it up there. I mean, it was incredible. I mean, it was stuff that my view on this is very simple. If you change the races that are accused of being discriminated against, and you would get a different opinion from the court, then you don't have an honest court decision. You don't have an honest application of the law. And I have no doubt that if it was if you change Asians to the black students being discriminated against, I have no doubt the court would have ruled in a different direction. So there is racial prejudice is unconstitutional, period. There's no exception.
And apparently we've been corrected. It was Oregon, and that sounds much more familiar than Wisconsin. But it was a state that was mandating face masks and had an exemption based on race. So let's the state.
Well, people confuse Madison and Eugene all the time. The movie Animal House they think is about Madtown, but it's actually about Eugene.
American history class should only consist of the movie The Patriot. Just play it every day and throw out The National Treasure every 3 weeks too.
That's a great film. Both of those are great films, and both National Treasure films are great. Celebrating our history, like books like 1775 by Kevin Phillips are great. Books about James Ellroy about how history really works behind the scenes, behind the curtains, also very good. A lot better than a lot of the insanity that's going on in our universities. But what's amazing is how much it's infiltrated corporate advertising. It mirrors and mimics the popular front strategy of the left in the 1920s and 1930s to co-opt the institutions that influence the mind. Newspapers, media, entertainment, the academy, human resources departments and employers, advertising departments. If you control how people think, you can control the world. And they've done so at rapid pace in the past decade.
But now, so I haven't read the lawsuit, but what is going to be the legal basis of the lawsuit? They're going to sue the institution over the sorry, what's the word I'm looking for when they teach you stuff? The curriculum. They're going to sue the institution over the curriculum on the basis that the curriculum itself is rooted in some form of discrimination?
Yes, and that they're preaching discrimination. So they're encouraging, incentivizing, rewarding discrimination, that they're going to be, and that sometimes the policies themselves are discriminatory. Sometimes they form a harassing atmosphere. So people know about sexual harassment, but also harassment based on race is illegal. So any form of harassment based on a particular trait or status is illegal under federal law. So so you have the constitutional provisions, the federal provisions, in some cases state law provisions. So it depends on which ones it is, but that's where and they're starting to come up with creative ways to challenge it.
It's interesting. Okay, I'm gonna follow that. I'll break down one of those lawsuits because it is very interesting. Let me just get this off here. Okay, it's amazing. It is. Yeah, well, I'll do a breakdown of one of the lawsuits. It'll be hopefully a shorter one.
And it'll be an ongoing topic. It's the ways of trying to remedy some of the crazy things that are happening in our institutions and academies. And it's kind of like, to bridge in briefly to the Twitter suit.
Yeah, let's do it.
So yeah, what happened is the guy who discovered the Hunter Biden laptop, who reported it, is suing Twitter because Twitter originally refused to allow the New York Post story about his laptop about his discovery of Hunter Biden's laptop to run